I'd like to start the meeting of December 2nd, 2009. First item of business will be public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to make a public comment? Seeing none, I'll move next to the approval of the minutes of October 28th, 2009.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Are there any comments, revisions, or additions? Wow. Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Adams.
I have a question, and this is on page 6. Okay, in the sort of in the middle of the page, there's an action. What was
What page, 7?
6.
6.
Okay, it says Peugeot Boucher 440, and that says Adams Boucher Drury Sharp opposed. Is that the right listing of names on that? It seems to me the maker of the motion, the seconder of the motion, looks like Boucher disagreed with that motion. I'm just bringing it up. Is there...
Mr. Adams, the seconder is not expressing their approval or disapproval of the motion by seconding. So,
Thank you.
okay. Are there any other questions or revisions or comments? Seeing none, all those in... Oh.
Major, just a very minor.
Mr. DeForest.
There appears to be a tilde over canon on page 7.
Yes, Mr. DeForest, if you wish to, why don't you come forward, identify yourself, and thank you for reading the minutes this closely.
Yeah. There appears to be a tilde on
Yes.
page 7 over canon Perdido,
Uh-huh.
and that makes it canyon Perdido, which
Yes.
it isn't. It is a canon, a real live canon.
That's incorrect.
All right.
It's incorrect. The Spanish spelling with an O and an N. It's a cañón. It's a canon.
Mm-hmm.
It's both words are in Spanish, so this is correct.
Thank you.
Please.
We all learn. Okay. Are there any other...
Chair, should I leave it on or take it off? Because
Well, let me put it this way. What does it say in the city legal records for the
they
street?
don't use them at all. So I can take it off if you want
I
me
think
to.
we should take it off since the city may choose how it does legally. So we will take that off. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. So the next item of business is the consent calendar. Oh, item 2. Thank you.
Madam Chair, item A, 1935 State Street was continued to January 6th, 2010. Item B, 435 State Street was postponed 1 week at the applicant's request, and item C, 625 Chapala Street was final approval as noted. Those were all reviewed by Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you. I have a motion.
So moved to ratify the consent calendar.
Thank you. I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I have to abstain from item C, 625 Chapala Street.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item of business are announcements or requests by applicants for continuances, etc.
So, Madam Chair, I just wanted to confirm, I think Commissioner Schallenberger questioned, we do have a HLC meeting next week, okay? So that would be the 9th, December 9th, and then the next meeting after that would be January 6th of 2010. And I believe Mr. Lamone has some announcements.
Oh,
Commission, the City Council will be considering 2 items in the next several weeks. The next week item on December 8th are amendments to the tree preservation ordinances in the city, including some changes to our historic structures ordinance. And the reason we're doing that is to clarify the roles and responsibilities as you work, as you review tree removals in coordination with the Parks and Recreation Commission. So we'll be providing you later this week a link to those reports so you can review, and if you're welcome to come in. I know Mr. Adams commented at the Ordinance Committee on some concerns he had, and I think we've addressed those. So that will be on next Tuesday's agenda. And on the 15th of the following week, we are actually going back to the City Council to report on the 2-year update status report on the NPO update. Again, that's primarily dealing with the Single Family Design Board, but there are changes that are going to be contemplated that will affect your review of single-family homes subject to infill development in the El Pueblo Viejo district. So those are 2 things that council will be considering.
Oh, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
follow up. I would like to attend the December 8th City Council meeting.
Please do. Thank you.
And I did bring up the question of jurisdiction about removal of trees, so I'll just follow up and give a report
Okay.
on the tree ordinance.
Shall we move on to subcommittee reports? Are there any subcommittee reports? Our other...
Good afternoon. Betty Weiss, City Planner. I am here on a subcommittee-related issue. I would like to ask the Historic Landmarks Commission to create a subcommittee, an ad hoc short-term subcommittee, to work with staff and the applicant of the Entrada project. We are drafting a substantial conformance determination response to the applicant's request, and I can tell you that some critical elements of that process ongoing is the HLC's review of the project. It's just a matter of ordinance and general expectation that we have conveyed to the applicant that, of course, their project requires full and standard review by the Historic Landmarks Commission. There are very few, if any, changes to the Californian plan, which has already been, or they call Area A, which has already received a preliminary approval from the Historic Landmarks Commission. So that project component will be brought back to you, full commission. We don't think it really necessitates a subcommittee review. However, the applicant is changing or proposing to change portions of the Area B project, as well as the substantial new approach to Area C with the new plaza. And given the size and complexity of the project, we've found, and I think you have too, that sometimes the subcommittee work can be helpful. Certainly does not take the place of the full commission review. So I wanted you to know that basically the substantial conformance review doesn't change that at all. It doesn't change at all that your review would occur as a matter of natural course and standard requirements. One of the key things about the substantial conformance, and just related to this project overall, is time, and time is of the essence. That's one of the greatest concerns about this project, is how long it's been in process and what the status of it is, and how will these changes also occur in a matter of time, in appropriate time. So we are asking for the subcommittee to work with us in an effort to have as efficient and timely process as possible. And we do think, and I think you would agree, that that has helped on other projects to have a subcommittee. So our request is, if today you wanted to appoint an ad hoc subcommittee, the applicant is needing to make progress again. We're going to be pretty clear that the project needs to make some good progress in order to maintain its approvals.
And I'm sorry, I may have missed a link there. Are you saying that this ad hoc subcommittee is to help you make the substantial conformance determination, or it is after that has been determined?
It's really more about after. What I was saying about substantial conformance is the fact that we state that they need historic landmarks approvals really isn't anything special. That is standard. And so it's moving forward so that they can comply with the conditions of the substantial conformance. And I know, Deborah Andaloro told me, who worked on the project prior, that there was a subcommittee of the HLC in the past. I think Alex Pouchot had served on it. It's usually you pick among yourselves, but I did want to make at least
Some
a
continuity,
suggestion.
yes.
That if Mr. Peugeot wanted to participate again, that would be great. And then
Yes.
also, if Mr. Adams, just because of the amount of public space and the
Yes.
relationship to the plazas and landscaping, but
Yes.
certainly that's up to you all.
And let me ask, is it a minimum of 3?
It could be 2 to 3. It shouldn't be more than 3.
I see.
I'm not sure what your quorum is, but I think 3 would be sufficient. I don't think we need.
5.
I don't think that we need 4.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Usually when we have a subcommittee on a project, for example, like the airport and things like that, it's when it's gone through the process pretty much. And this is checking all the fine details. It's usually not before it comes before the full commission. At least that's my feeling about the way it's worked in the past.
I think it could work in a number of ways. The idea that we have is that it doesn't take the place for the full commission review. It's just I had explained to the applicant that I thought there might be 2 or 3 subcommittee meetings, just to look at some of the details of the relationship between Area B and Area C. And I recalled you had a project subcommittee recently. I asked the staff about the El Encanto. Sometimes you have a subcommittee just to address certain components of the project. I'm not thinking that it's a review of all elements of the project. Complete review would happen at the full commission.
Well, then let me ask you this, and I'm sorry for my ignorance again. Are we looking at it after substantial conformance, and what level of development are we looking at? After conceptual and prior to preliminary would be what the subcommittee is looking at?
Yes, we're looking at conceptual towards preliminary. So the subcommittee would be comfortable and give direction towards the applicant being able to return to the full commission for preliminary. I would suggest that it doesn't matter about substantial conformance. Think about this as just a regular project that's received its planning commission review, and it is now in the design review process. We will be issuing the substantial conformance letter in the next several weeks, so you really won't be seeing it again until after the substantial conformance determination. I'm here today because we'd like to write in the determination that staff has asked for a subcommittee to move the project along. Again, that's our interest of holding the applicant to a timetable, and we need to do what we can to help be responsive time-wise, and that's why we think a subcommittee could help achieve that. But this is just the design review process of any approved project, so it's normal in terms of your processes.
Well, I'll ask for comments from this committee then as to what they think about this. Mr. Schallenberger.
Well, I would agree, and I would think we would have had a subcommittee regardless of substantial conformity for a project of this magnitude. So
Okay.
we should do that.
Are there any other comments? Are we looking at agreement?
My comment is still that I think it's premature to have a subcommittee. I mean, I don't know why we're rushing this project through like this. I mean, I don't see that it's going to speed it that much, because to me, it just sort of prolongs it. You have the meetings of the subcommittees, but you still have to come all the way back through the full commission.
Right, and I have to say I'm ambivalent. I see the value of speeding through the commission, but I'm also concerned that at this very critical level between concept and preliminary, that not having, a minimum of 3 does not represent the prevailing viewpoints on this commission, and that makes me very nervous, which is why I would then push for 4, and it be absolutely opposing and approving viewpoints be, otherwise there's no point, unless those viewpoints are represented.
I mean, this is a hugely important project. I can't think of one that's been more important after all this time to the community as a whole, and I think the more carefully we can do this, the better we are.
So, and I will suggest, if Mr. Peugeot will come on, and Mr. Adams, and I would ask Mr. Sharp to step forward because he is quite clear about his viewpoints and his thinking about it, and I think it would be very valuable. Otherwise, I see no point in this subcommittee.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to qualify. It is not to take the place of the full commission, and it wouldn't be to make any major decisions, but it's a more informal environment, and those that you have served on it, you can more readily roll up your sleeves and look at different design concepts and get more done in the course of a meeting.
Sure.
So the big pictures with people opposing or varying views would still be fully expected or appropriate to occur at the full commission meeting.
Yes.
One thing that came out of the El Encanto subcommittee that was particularly helpful was the applicant asked for, and we gave some directions on how the presentation was to be made in terms of grouping of buildings or area, and I think for sure that would come into play in this as well. We could help guide the applicant in terms of their presentation, and I think that might make our meetings more efficient as well.
Mr. Sharp, I'll ask you your opinion.
I'll serve if it helps move the thing along, but I have some grave reservations, as you know.
I know. And you're not alone. So, may I ask for a motion to that effect, that we appoint a subcommittee consisting of Mr. Peugeot, Mr. Adams, and Mr. Sharp?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you. We'll be back in touch
Thanks.
with the group, both the full commission and the subcommittee. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So was Murray the maker of the motion?
Yes.
And then who seconded it? Because we heard two or three different voices.
Thank you. Our first item of business is the public hearing on 561 West Mountain Drive.
I had some comments I was going to make.
Oh, I'm
about the
sorry.
holiday party.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We'll move back. I'll move back to general business subcommittee reports, and this will be our... Oh, okay. I closed that too quickly. Ms.
I
Boucher.
brought the sign-up list, which we had last time. Unfortunately, Mr. Drury is not going to be able to attend the party, so I have to take him off. Does everyone remember what he or she signed up for? Mm-hmm. Okay? You all remember. Okay. I won't be able to make it. You won't be able to bring dessert?
You...
What's the date?
The 12th. So are you coming, or are you not coming? Yes. I'm sorry. That's too bad. I'll cross you off the dessert list then.
Yeah, I have another conflict in
Okay.
All right.
All right. And then we haven't sent out an invitation, and between the chairman and Mr. Sharp and me, we'll figure out what we're doing here and get back. I may have to call on some of you to do some emailing or phoning, okay? Because it's a big list. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good. Now, Mr. Adams.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the lecture called Historic Gardens of Santa Barbara, delivered by Sidney Baumgartner with Kellum DeForest in attendance, was a true delight. This was held last week, and you just get an appreciation for the finest gardens that Elizabeth DeForest recognized and Kellum Lockwood DeForest did, and I just want to appreciate the DeForest family, Sidney Baumgartner, and just the wonderful garden heritage. It was a great night.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements or none? Now we will move to 561 West Mountain Drive.
We'll move to this side because I'm going to use an old-fashioned PowerPoint.
Okay.
Which is on 18's camera. Okay. Everybody see that, or should I take out one bank of lights?
No.
It's good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, when I first went out to see this house with the case planner, I thought that we had a Cliff May house in our midst. You know, looking at the simplicity of the design is sort of a modern interpretation of the Mexican hacienda. And therefore, I did ask for a historic structures report. The report did determine that it's not a Cliff May house, although it shares many of the creative features that a Cliff May house would typically have. It turns out it was the first house designed by John Pittman when he was still a draftsman. He was age 24. The house is a very simple interpretation of the Mexican hacienda style. And one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that it has a very close attention to honesty in materials. The house is actually adobe, the walls are adobe, and all the heavy timber supports that you see are actually structural. So it's very functional and yet elegant at the same time. The original plans, which we do have on file, called for a wood shake roof. So I was concerned that maybe we had a replacement in the roof here. Well, evidently what happened was, at the time of construction, the roofer for the project, H&H Roofing, was able to salvage some tiles. He salvaged them from the old Cold Spring School when they were re-roofing. So we've got real antique tiles on top of the house. Even though the house isn't that old, they're real antique tiles. And it actually turned out to be quite a good thing for the house. Again, here we can see the heavy timber construction. You know, just very simple. It's actual, structural timber. It's not, decorative. Yet some of the windows, treatments, and things you see are quite modern. This is the gable end in the living room. It's got the, typical of the 50s and 60s mid-century modern. It's got the glass gable in it. And as I said before, this was designed by John Pittman in 1955. If you're looking from this path out towards the gardens, there you can see there is a small lawn area, but most of the lot is, as we see in this picture, quite steep and more in a natural setting. As we continue to walk around the house, this is the rear porch. Again, you can see simple, honest use of materials. The adobe is the entire house. It actually it's not a false front or anything. The whole house, all four sides of the house have adobe. This is another feature that you find typically on a Cliff May house, is this canted window in the study. And it just has a perfect picture. It frames the Mission Canyon view from that corner very, very nicely. Here's a second view of that. And then continuing to walk around the house, this gets to the utilitarian side of the house where the carport used to be. The house, that's the only major change that the actual house had. If you look at this courtyard area, that, again, it's very similar to Cliff May. The house kind of wraps around, it's canted on three sides, kind of wraps around this sort of sheltered brick paved courtyard. And if you look over here, you'll see some areas that have these structural timbers, and they look kind of like they're oddly spaced. And it's even more closely exampled here. You see them here, here, and here. Well, that was the original carport. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, here's a close-up of it. Interestingly enough, if I can pull that back just slightly. Thank you. Interestingly enough, when they did this bedroom, there are two bedrooms. This was in addition when they enclosed the carport in 1978. They left the structural timbers in place. So you can still see where the original carport timbers were, and then they infilled with adobe material to match existing. And of course, unfortunately, they use these sort of modern aluminum sliders. Can't have everything. Maybe at some point some owner will replace us with a more appropriate material. Here we can see at the same time that here's the canted patio down here. At the same time that the carport was enclosed in 1978, a second detached two-car garage was built on the site adjacent to the building. Here's a closer look at it. It is compatible in materials and design. It's got the glass gables. It's got a tile roof. It's not the original tiles, but it's matches fairly significantly. Basically, the report determined, and I agree with the report, that the house qualifies mainly on its architecture. It's an interesting, modern interpretation of the Mexican hacienda style. The family, the Jorgensens, weren't particularly notable, although a very nice couple. being John Pittman's first house. We're not 100% sure that he actually designed it all on. It may have been Mr. Jorgensen's idea, and John put it to life, as a draftsman. We don't know for sure how much the Jorgensens had in the hand of actually designing the house. But architecturally, it is interesting, and it's there are very few actual modern adobe structures in Santa Barbara. There are a few around, but not too many. Okay. Now we had some discussion last time about how much of the property should be included. If you look at the third page in your resolution, you'll see that I'm calling for just the house primarily with 5 feet on the south, west, and east sides, and then picking up the entire courtyard in that canted where the fountain is. The Jorgensen Ranch house, it's a ranch-style house. I think there might have been some confusion over the name last week. Ranch sounds like maybe it was part of an original old family ranch, but it wasn't. It was originally on 8.8 acres. It's the subject of a lot split. It will now be on 2.16 acres. There are no other ranch buildings such as barns, paddocks, stables. The site is very rugged. There's no evidence of any ranching or farming activity on the site. There are some fruit trees, orange and lemon trees on that planted area, but not. It was just for personal use. So that's why staff's recommending that the boundary, be typical of what we would do, which would we put a 5-foot perimeter around the house to pick up any immediately adjacent landscaping that might affect the view of the house. Also, this house is really not available for public view. It sits, down a fairly long driveway, and so really the only people that will ever see it are the owners and their invited guests. It may be somewhat visible from across Mission Canyon, but that would be, just a very slight view. But staff is requesting that you would adopt the resolution to designate the Jorgensen Ranch House at 561 West Mountain Drive as a structure of merit. And with that, Madam Chair, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. First, I'll take public comment. Mr. DeForest?
Good afternoon, Kellum DeForest. I take issue with having only 5 feet around the house. I'm glad but including the patio area, but I don't think that is sufficient. And did I hear something about a smaller acreage for the lot? I know this property, all the property is being split up so so it can be developed. But and just looking at those pictures, there's certainly more around the property. I mean, if people are allowed to build 5 feet within the house, that doesn't preserve a structure of merit. Also, I realize the garage is only is 78, but so it's not. It is newer than general landmark classification, but certainly this commission has the power to include it, especially if since it's done in the same style as the original ranch house. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forrest.
Madam Chair, can I answer to that?
Yes.
It's not been the policy of this commission or the city to designate an entire site unless there's some demonstration. For instance, we've had a couple of George Washington Smith houses where there were actual formal gardens that existed from the 1920s. The only really formal area of the landscaping area here we are including, which is this front patio area, we typically do use a 5 or 6 foot, even on some of our larger structures, perimeter around the building. As that's not said because we're trying to say you can't build within 5 feet. This zoning is for one house per lot, so there won't be a second house on the lot. There always is the possibility that somebody would add on to this house as a structure of merit. You would, of course, be the reviewing body, so you'd have your ability to say that. But because there is no actual formal landscape plan or ranch facility associated with the house, staff would strongly recommend that we stay with the way we normally do it, which is, we're essentially just designating the house. Also, this house, this designation came about as a condition of approval for the lot split, and at that time, the Planning Commission resolution also talked about designating the house, not the entire site. So with that, Madam Chair, I turn it back to you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any comments?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Yes, Mr. Adams.
This is a wonderful house. It feels of a bygone time, but part of that, I think, are the surrounding trees. That being said, I'm not really making a comment to go against Planning Commission, but some of these olives and/or oaks surrounding this property really give a feeling of the time and place. And I just want to state that for the record. I think that surrounding tree canopies are very important to this feeling of this house.
Thank you. And I'm just going to confirm, I'm uneasy too when you have a ranch house. It should have the surroundings that make it a ranch house and how you perceive it. However, I also understand the practicalities of designating a large swath around a building. But I will say my knowledge that and I'm going to ask you to confirm this, that any building on this property, 5 feet away, 20 feet away, if it's a detached accessory structure or anything, would come before us even if it is not touching the structure of merit. So therefore the property is protected under that umbrella. It's not just the house that has a ring around it.
Right.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd also be concerned about the precedent that it could set if we start just picking up large properties. For instance, we have a number of buildings that we're looking at in the San Roque area, which are ranch-style houses. However, we wouldn't designate the entire site because it's a ranch-type house there either. So I would be a little concerned about the precedent that this might set. Mm-hmm. If this were a former ranch and there was a operation and it operated as a ranch and there were outbuildings and things, then I could understand doing that. But given the fact that it's a minimal structure of merit, the report came back just very touched on a couple of the categories. It's only for its association with its architecture. I understand the bigger issue of there being a setting around it, but because of its zoning, that setting is pretty well protected, and that any outbuildings, major grading, alterations that would happen in the future would come back to this commission because this will be tagged in the permit system as a structure of merit, and that would require your review.
Thank you. Yes.
Jake, not specific to this project or this property, but has staff ever considered using, it seems like we're looking for a basis for the boundary of the structure of merit. Has staff ever considered using the zoning setbacks as the basis? In other words, even though it's on a large property, there's typically like a 20-foot setback. So if you went in reverse off of the face of walls 20 feet out, that would essentially establish your boundary. The setback would make the boundary.
It's not something that we've considered. In many cases, and in this case included, the owner is not willing to go forward with the designation if we pick up the entire site. People are a little concerned when we designate a property that we may be taking some of their property rights away from them, and so there's been a little bit more of a comfort level with doing it the way we've been doing it. For instance, the Santa Barbara High School was done the same way. We've got the building, and we've got, I believe on that one, we've got a 10-foot perimeter, but that's what we've got, and that's what all the school board was willing to give. They weren't willing to give the entire site, and that's typical with some of the smaller properties also. And this gentleman here is the property owner, and they've agreed to the Planning Commission condition to designate the house, but they're not willing to designate the entire site. You may speak to that if you wish to hear from him.
I don't think we're disputing, I think we're simply discussing the concept and what we like to see, but understand the practicalities of a property owner and his rights. So I will look for a motion.
Jake, I just want to ask something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I was too quick.
I was wondering if there's a way of just some kind of a language to say the vegetation contribute, they're contributing to the essence of the designation. So they're not, designation is not part of the designation, but it also gives a language of recognition that the vegetation is something that is contributing to the structure of it.
Especially the tree canopy.
The tree canopy in that kind of language, not necessarily. I don't know if that's possible, but that is just one of the ways you could give a recognition of some of the things that are contributing to a ranch style home in the rural area.
Right, I could put some language into that effect, but make it clear that they're not actually part of the designation.
They're certainly not in this map.
Yeah, and the other issue is, this is in a high fire hazard area,
Right.
and there's always the possibility that the fire department's going to come in and say you've got to clear some of this. Most of the site, as I said, I think I showed a photograph. Most of the site is fairly natural looking, like this. I think there's a better picture. Like this, it's a very steep slope, and there's a lot of brush. There are some nice trees. Most of them are up fairly close to the house. Matter of fact, this one's within 5 feet of the house. But there is that possibility that the fire department could come along and require that they do some clearing for fire prevention purposes. So I really wouldn't want to tie the hands that way either.
Okay.
Now, there's the discussion that you're having. We're going to be making some recommendations and modifications to the criteria in the MEA. We want to make it tighter, make it more clear, make more of a distinction between what's a structure of merit and what's a landmark, make everybody's job easier. At that time, that would be a good time to have this discussion in terms of when we designate a property, do we want to change what that means? Do we want to stay with it as it goes, or come up with a different alternative? And that would be a good opportunity to have that discussion at a public forum where people could weigh in, and then you would also be able to have a discussion among yourselves.
Thank you. I have a motion.
I will make the motion that we adopt the resolution designating the Jorgensen Ranch House located at 561 West Mountain Drive as the City of Santa Barbara structure of merit.
Thank you. Do you have a second? It seems to me that the applicant has something to say, perhaps. Would you identify yourself for the record?
Thank you. Greg Parker for the Jorgensen Ranch LLC. I have two comments and one thought. First of all, we were asked, this is a 2,500-foot house, including a converted carport in 78 that is a very low ceiling, hardly historical element of the property. And our understanding in our discussions previously with planning staff was that the structure merit designation would not include the converted carport that was done in 78. We knew it wouldn't include the garages, but the bricks are different in the carport, the windows are different in the carport, and as a practical matter, this is a very small structure for a 2-acre lot. And I think it's important for us to recognize that although it fit very well with Mr. and Mrs. Jorgensen, who were childless for a number of years, in the long run, to preserve the structure itself, we probably need to add some allowance for addition and some allowance for just making it into more of a practical structure. So our understanding was that the carport conversion was not a factor, and I think it was actually mentioned that way in the historic report. That's not how this line's been drawn. We don't, and I just saw this for the first time today. I had not been received a draft or any discussion about this. So that's that's one element. We've had Brian Cornell do some studies of how one might add on to the structure, though we're not looking at that at all. And to preserve the historic structure, which we're not opposed to preserve the historic structure, it seems like the likely addition is actually off that carport end. or it is to the south where the tree canopies that were just mentioned are, which are actually, as you can see from this picture, the trees to the south are much lower and much, it's a different, it's not really a part of the house. The main portions of the house for their historical importance are that patio, which we don't object to, and the view to the Goleta Valley, which is off of the west end. So I would like the commission to consider whether really a converted carport from 1978 is a portion of a historic structure. It's not adequate in terms of ceiling heights or anything else. It's been converted to a master bedroom that just sprawls out. So that was the one thought I had. And I think you need to allow for the future of the property, and to say that we're limiting it to a 2,500-foot house on a.
You are not limited. You are not limited.
I'm sorry. The converted carport is. It is.
No, can I understand
Yes,
what's going on.
Mr. Jacob.
No, he's talking about the carport that's actually attached to the building.
Yes.
I don't know what staff he was referring to. I've never indicated that way, because it's actually attached to the building. And it's done, it almost follows the Secretary of the Interior standards in terms of the fact the way they left the original structural members there and filled it in with the block. I always did state that the 1978 two-car garage would not be attached. Also, it is possible to add on to structures of merit. You would have to have review, but you can even add on to a city landmark if you do it in a certain way that meets the Secretary of the Interior standards. Therefore, you're not necessarily tied to keeping the 2,700 square feet or whatever the square footage on the existing house is.
I understand the addition, and I understand the criteria for that, and I've been through that with architects and consultants and with Shelley Bookspan, but I think that the idea is we might there's a possibility you might demolish the carport portion only to allow the house to function properly, and the converted carport portion only. That was my understanding. And so, again, conversation would have helped. Having an advance notice of where you're drawing the line would have helped. Didn't happen. But when our discussions with planning staff is going through this Jorgensen Ranch subdivision project, our understanding was that the line would be there.
It was never brought to my attention.
Okay.
And I would disagree with that. Normally, even if there's been alterations on the building, it's a contiguous structure. We would designate the structure. There again, that doesn't mean you can't come in with an applicant or a permit request to remodel, demolish, add on to, or do whatever you want to that. It would just be reviewed by the commission, and they would just want to make sure that it's done in a way that's compatible and doesn't detract from the character-defining features of the house, which are pretty much not on that part of the structure anyway. There is the porches and the other areas of the house. So.
And I think with that understanding that the character-defining portion, we're going to have to come back anyway, no matter what we do with the house. We understand that completely, and we support that, and we're not opposed to that. We like the old house. We just know as a practical matter, as long as, and maybe if the motion were to include something to the effect that the character-defining features are not necessarily focused on this carport, that would be helpful to us.
Oh, no, I don't think our motion can include that. Our motion does not include what character-defining features are when there's been no proposal. The historic report is what defines what the character-defining features are. And that's what we would consult for any proposition that you make regarding the house. But we cannot include that.
Okay.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Oh, Drury. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Mr. Schallenberger abstains. Mr. Schallenberger? That motion carries. Thank you. Okay. The next item of business is 913 State Street.
Henry Lunny.
Yeah,
I know.
me too.
First of all, I have to get up on, there's some photographs of the package for you, but there was no way of photographing the facade without getting up on the parking structure, which gives you a pretty good idea. This is in my opinion, and Jake, you may disagree with me, but I believe this is a historic building. And even though it's not Hispanic, I think the guidelines actually for the Pueblo Viejo does make some reference that this is oops. Yeah, it was a levee shoes. There was a very strange awning that was there once. Remember the striped awning? Yeah. There's Angle is going to be here as a tenant, and when I talked to the property owner, I kind of warned them that this building was to remain, and therefore the facade couldn't be changed. He agreed. The actual storefront was changed, and probably not too long ago, but it's not. Well, it's unfortunate, actually. So what I suggested to the client and the tenant was to, look, let's do something that we can actually simply attach to the building, because tenants come and go. And at some point in time, you can detach it and change the character temporarily, and leave the structure entirely as it exists today, with the exception of the storefront, which was again modified. And if you see the drawings, you will see that what I'm proposing is to keep the straight storefront, and I suspect that that's what the way it was. I couldn't find any photographs anywhere in my archives.
I think that was the shape of it.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah. And so the idea is to just go back. And then the other idea that I noticed is that on the dormers themselves, the windows are actually broken up with mullions. And at some point in time, the mullions were taken out and replaced.
Yeah.
And I suspect they did that because there used to be a mezzanine up there, which is no longer, and it's not there. This will not be utilized as a second floor at all. However, I think the owner is quite willing to replace the windows with mullions as they were before. And so, anyway, I'm here simply on a conceptual basis to see if this approach would make sense. I think. Again, I would be very reluctant, and I would be uncomfortable if the facade or the architecture, even though it doesn't meet the Pueblo Viejo ordinance, would be changed at all. It should remain, and if it isn't a structure of merit, it should be. But so anyway, what we're here for is to just simply have a steel storefront, and to basically apply the ornamentation to the frame of the existing building with a hand-forged wrought iron.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for public comment, and the first person will be Ms. Days.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I admit I became very nervous when I read this agenda item because this is really an important building. I think perhaps the first thing that you can find, I couldn't take the time to look for really the very first version of the 1919 facade, but our own El Pueblo Viejo book states that the original, probably brick building was built in around 1885, and then the remodel was 1919, and you can see just on the edge there a pre-earthquake, pre-1925 earthquake photograph of the Bothine building with, there you go, to the right-hand side. You can see the edge of,
oh, I see.
There you go.
Teeny tiny little bit.
And so you can see that it did have that dormer facade.
It's the very, very edge there.
So that is like the 1919 version of it. We have a pretty good photograph of it in our 1986 El Pueblo Viejo guidebook, which does show the
Isn't that cute?
window lights
Wonderful.
in the dormers. And of course, the
Terrific awning.
I believe these the triple fenestration below the balustrade is now blind. I think they've been filled in, and they were windows. And Louise and I can remember when Michelle Levy shoes were there and clothing on the second floor, and their clothing was shown in. Those were actually display windows. And this is a photograph that I took in 1987, which would have been the year after that, for my report on J. Corbley Poole, because sources say that he designed the 1919 facade remodel. There is a, and you can see that very strange awning, which I don't think anybody else had, but it certainly did mark Michelle Levy shoe store, and there's a version of it here in a copy of an issue of Noticias in 1971. You can see it there. So I do ask that you respect the original 1919 portions of it. There's almost nothing left on State Street that's original facade from before the earthquake. There was a building in the 1000 block that I tried to save to no avail, but this one, that was in Hispanic style. This is not, obviously, but it's very, very special, and it is on our list, and I agree with Henry, certainly, that it should be designated. The storefront was shortened. You can see, especially from the book, that it had the very deep, old-fashioned, very heavy retail-type windows. Yes, and my mother had to go in there because she had a very, very difficult shoe size, and so it was great fun to go in there. But and then in more recent years, it's been shortened like so many of them have, and the building, to me, looks very sad right now. It's just white, blind-looking, nothing very interesting, but I do feel it should be designated, and that the original parts of the facade should be replaced where possible and saved. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, just a clarification, there's still windows. You can see them. It's just that the glass was changed.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the idea would be to bring it back to, have to do some research to the way it was.
Madam Chair?
Thank you, yes.
There's an interesting tidbit about that awning. It's a style called Hollywood Regency.
Oh, yes.
And it's making a comeback.
I think it's great.
And,
I just love it. I think
there are
it's
people
great.
that are restoring houses and commercial buildings down in the LA area, down in that
Terrific.
that venue. So we had it. It's gone.
It should come back.
It's back.
Come back. The second public comment is Mr. DeForest.
Kellum DeForest. This, as Ms. Days points out, that this is a very important building, at least for us Santa Barbarans who remember the shoe store well. It was the place to get one's shoes, and I guess I don't know, I think the clothing got added sometime, and I would like to ask, when did the Hollywood style awnings and things come in? Because they are not part of the, at least my childhood memory of the facade of the building, and I would like explanation of why, at least in the El Pueblo Viejo, that this seems a little ornate for the design element, either of the original design or of the El Pueblo Viejo guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. I'll bring it back to questions from the commission. Are there any questions from the commission? Mr. Drury?
So you're really proposing to bring it back as close as possible to how it was. And then there's something about the, as I recall, there was the entranceway went in with displays, glass displays to the door. It'll be somewhat like that, I'm assuming.
To answer the question, there's two things. What you're seeing and what is being requested is purely temporary and is designed to be that way, so that at some point in time, once we have all of the facts, at some point in time it could be fully restored. We'll restore the windows, which is really the only modified area in the storefront. The idea is to, whatever we do today, you can unvault it and keep bringing it back to its historic nature of the building. Right now, I don't have absolutely any, I don't have any evidence or any proof of what that storefront was at what period of time. I can see that in the 1800s, that was straightforward. That was changed several times. So that's one important thing, and I'm nervous about proposing something that proposes to be authentic and it's not. I much rather leave everything detachable. That's the one issue. As far as the style is concerned, is very much in keeping with this style. The idea of the fenestrations and their ironwork and the cast iron and all that is very much in keeping with this period of the vernacular. And then finally is I would feel very uncomfortable in doing something so permanent to this facade that would do the opposite. And what I learned about preservation is whatever you're doing, put something in the face of it that you can easily remove for any future generations that may want to truly, authentically turn this into a restoration project.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobus, could you actually tell me what the style is?
It's really not any, it's got those, the balustrade is like neoclassical revival. The dormers are, American colonial revival. The arches really don't represent anything I could say. The added ironwork appears to be Chirigaresque. So it's
Well,
really,
I mean, without the ironwork.
Without the ironwork, it's really, it's probably closer to a neoclassical revival. Right? Looking at those balustrades, if they're original to the building, it was probably neoclassical revival. But without more evidence than we've got, it's hard to say. And because of the date of the building, we know it would have been a brick structure, and it might have even been at one point a Victorian era. It could have been Italianate or some other Italian era brickwork under there. We don't know when those arches were added in the second-story windows, and those are probably not original to the building. It looks like something that might have been contrived later, but we don't know this because of the lack of photographic documentation and not having the actual plans.
Thank you. Ms. Murray, would you like to weigh in on? I'd like to know what we're trying to be appropriate to.
When in doubt, you should do a historic structure report, because that's really the only way to dig out, to get the history and do excavation and find out what it was. But I agree with Jake. There's all different styles. But if you look at it, you immediately feel, 1885, that time, and especially for a storefront, this part was very common. The brick and the show windows. The top, to me, was meant to be a home, and I think that's why they put the dormers to make it more look a home. But it's such a grand building, and it's really rare to have, as everyone has mentioned. So that's my first instinct is, when you don't know, it's really good to do a study, and that way we are not forever guessing. And your idea of saying whatever you do, don't mess it up, is a good thought, to do something that is completely reversible or whatever. But at the same time, you want something to be compatible with the date of the building, with its period of significance. But you don't want to just put any old contemporary thing, or even just a Spanish colonial revival ornament on it or something. You want something that is truly compatible with the ornaments of the buildings, which are the arches and the balustrade and all those little things. So,
Thank you. And did I have other questions? Yes, Mr. Schallenberger.
I just had just a couple of practical questions. This ornamental iron, is that proposed to be attached like with standoffs? Is that, in other words, it doesn't go all the way to the ground. It's just attached to the building, so it would stand off an inch or two or something like that.
Yeah, the idea on the columns would actually be, I would say, probably 3/8 quarter-inch plate. And then
some brackets, yeah.
And then you simply weld the ornamentation to the surface of it. Also, my idea is something similar, but very different than what was done with your coffee beanies, and I think there's in Pastel Nuevo. And something similar was done, but it was done with sheet metal, and I don't think it looks as well. Given the urgency of the tenant wanting to move in, and that space is empty, and given the rarity of tenants wanting to lease any space, the idea was to actually do something that can be transformed. I agree with you, Fernina. A proper study should be done for the moment, and this is considered to be a short lease, is just to make enough improvements, I think, that would help the tenant at the moment.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Mr. Schallenberger?
Look in the photo that the center window above the storefront it looks larger than the other two.
Taller and larger.
But taller and wider. But
yes, there's a number of
but
proportions.
the elevation looks like they're equal. Or were you proposing to change that?
Oh no.
Okay.
No, that was I missed that.
Yeah,
I thought, just like the dormer up above.
Yeah, the dormers are different. Yeah.
No, the idea is to leave it, not touch it. Just maybe change the plate windows to broken.
Any other questions?
Just in the same vein, it seems that the proportions of the first floor are a little bit off from the photograph. It looks like your drawing is taller than the picture. That is, especially the space between the bottom of the window and the top of the display window. It seems to be more on your drawing. I was just wondering how
you're right, and it's meant to be an optical illusion, so to speak. That line that you see here, this was measured. It's right about here.
Oh, I see.
And the idea is to visually expand the height of that.
Oh, okay.
And that's why the iron went lower. And that's why you also see that the door does not go all the way up to the top. There is a section so that they can open the door out to the edge. It's just an effect.
Are there any other questions? Oh, yes. Ms. Gantz. Oh, Mr. Jacobus.
Madam Chair, we're implementing a new type of report that it's not official yet, but we can do this. It's called a preliminary historic research report. What it is it's kind of like a focused, similar to the old focused letter report, where we could have the architect hire one of the consultants to do the preliminary digging, where they would go through the Sanborns, through the archives and the libraries, through the plans archives, wherever they can go to get as much information as they can, and put that information together in a written form and present that to staff. And it gives us a basis, a starting point to make a determination as to whether we need a full report or not. In this case, I think likely eventually we'll have to have the full report. But maybe we could do some sort of a focused report like that in order to get the information that we need up front, any information that's available, so that, in terms of not keeping a space, we've got a glut of empty space on State Street, and I'd hate to be responsible for keeping a space from being rented. But that preliminary report would give us the ability to have someone do the digging I don't have the time, unfortunately, to do in some of the archives, and see what they can come up with and bring that back before the commission.
Thank you.
Are we into comments?
Yes, we are now into comments.
Well, Henry, I think this is a neat idea you have here. I was just, personally, it looks awfully ornate for this building, and I was just wondering if you could tone it down quite a bit, like a lot. That would be more in keeping with the simplicity, the basic simplicity of what we have there, because this just is a wham. Much as I appreciate what you've done, I do. It's wonderful, but I would want to see something an awful lot simpler than this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Schallenberger?
Yeah, I do like the the concept, the initial sort of this alteration to me just seems to be a continuation of a building that's had the history of the building is change. So I'm not opposed to something different and to dress it up in a different way, and I especially like the appearance of a base. This seems the existing elevation seems to lack any kind of defined base, and so I like the verticality on the pillars there, creating a sense of a base, and your optical illusion sort of overhang there with the divided horizontal members there that have a vertical feel to them. I think that really helps define the building and give it a nice solid base and an elevation view. So I like the concept.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Murray?
I would be in favor of a focused letter report because I think that will really help the applicant even get a chance to see some old photographs of these buildings, and it will get I think the photographs and just a little bit more knowledge about how this front was just been changed over time would give you that grounding, that foundation of how you want to present it, I think, and make like I agree with Mr. Schallenberger. I think that base needs some good sense of a statement, so to speak, but yet it needs to be really speaking to the rest of the important elements of the building. So I just suggest that would just be a good thing. I don't think it's gonna take much to dig up some photos at the Glet Hill. They might have something, and if they don't, then you say, okay, we've exhausted the search, and this is what we want to do.
Thank you. And any other comments? Then I'll look for, you're looking
just comments.
for, yes,
because
comments
you just
only.
wanted to find feedback on the concept of it.
Well, if we can get continued to the first meeting in January or sometime, that
All
would give
right.
me a chance to do this.
Then I will take that.
Tile or paint or something.
May I have that motion for a continuance to
So
the...
moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item is 1235 State Street. Oop, this goes with it. Thank you. Oh, this is,
That's
oh, Mary Louise? Thank you.
I had way more. I had a whole stack of photos here, and now I have.
Maybe Henry took them.
My first meeting with you, so I'm not sure where to put things.
You're basically being televised
These are
with
all
the
the
little
same?
X.
They're all the same. There's 4 separate copies here.
Let's pull 2 of them out.
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, then. Paper cut waiting to happen. All right. Will you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes. I'm Ron Esposito. And,
Okay.
I've been asked to design a color palette and to actually do the work on this property.
If you don't mind, I'll just mention that you are here because they wish to paint all the structures in Victoria Court. The structure with the address 1227 1233 State Street is a designated structure of merit, the Upper Hawley building. Also proposed is to legalize the as-built installation of entryway tile.
On here, that's that.
I see. Thank you.
I found a picture of it.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
These are the site photos.
In regards to the tile, I couldn't comment on that because I didn't have anything to do with
So,
the tile.
so that is not part of this.
That's part of the project because there is a pending enforcement case for the tile. So if they want to get another project on this site approved, this needs to be part of the project to abate the enforcement case.
Okay.
So that's why it's included.
I see. Okay. Keep going then, please.
Okay. So what I've done is I have did some research and taken some pictures of some of the existing facades up and down State Street. And I have designed a color palette with respect to the Santa Barbara architecture. And also did some research on Andalusian architecture.
Okay, and may I ask, can you say why each of these has been selected to be shown?
Basically, these are buildings with color.
Oh.
There's a lot of buildings that are in the off-white tones, which I've also designed into the palette for this property. But I pulled up the buildings of color to show that there is a range of color palette from A to Z, and I wanted to show that I am probably in those boundaries conservatively.
Okay. You may remove these, I'm assuming. Okay. Whoop.
These are some of
I'm
them.
going to flip these again.
Oh,
The viewing audience likes to see them this way. It's all right.
Some of the Andalusian style CN, different places in Spain that I pulled up on the internet just to show again color. In the variations thereof. So having done that and having basically studied what's here, I came up with a color palette that I think is very respectful of what's here.
Do you need these then?
Yeah, I also have those.
Oh, these are. Oh, okay.
This would be one example of the State Street side, one of the facades that I'm proposing that we color. The owner is asking that we do some sort of a very soft, controlled patina on the facades to give it some interest. So I've represented one of the facades here, and also I've added a Spanish fresco to bring down the space above the door.
Oh, wait, I'm sure you have more to say.
Well, these are existing photographs of what's there right now.
I see.
And I've increased the color palette intensity as we go to the interior of the courtyard, but not by much. But I haven't and increased it basically for. Sorry, I missed one. On this drawing right here, there's one that I missed over here.
Oh, then.
Sorry about that. If you don't mind.
Let me take the bottom off.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
This is on the interior, and it is basically this color palette. That would be the most intense of the color palettes, which is this right here.
Okay. So
the State Street side and the Victoria Street side, I kept it extremely conservative, more in the off-whites and tones, more in keeping with what's here and what you see. I sit on the Historical Preservation Committee for the City of Santa Clarita, or I did. I just my term was up and didn't re-up it for myself because I moved. But I'm respecting what you do and where you are. I spent a lot of time researching and matching and making sure that I wasn't stepping out of what's acceptable, I think, to what you have here already.
Okay. I'm going to ask for public comment, and I believe Mr. DeForest has something to say.
You haven't, better go up and look, but what are the colors now, and are they, is the reason for this repainting or changing color, is it solely because it needs a new coat, the Victoria Court needs a whole new coat of paint, or is there some other reason to change the color scheme and make it brighter? That it would be interesting to know that question. And of course, one has to consider the historic building on the corner of State Street and what color historically that building was, because that is a very old building and needs to be celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Mr. Drury.
The only question is, I understand you want to keep the 6th Street elevation, 4th Street elevation kind of low key, but you want to add a little zap to the interior of the courtyard.
We right now the whole entire facade structure is basically, I think, at most 2 different shades of white, and the owner's asked to give it some pizzazz, but not too much. So, as I mentioned earlier, I took a real hard look at just doing just that, just giving it a little bit more interest without going too far.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Peugeot. Thank you.
Maybe from staff. There are several buildings here, right? I mean, it's not just one building. There's a series of buildings, right?
There's about 25 different facades. Some small and some large.
And it's just one owner, one property owner? Is that?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. And some are more historic than others, right? Like I kind of remember vaguely Victoria Court in the late 70s, early 80s or something. But that was a remodel, right, of something else.
Well, the Upper Holly building, is landmark worthy. Mm-hmm. And
it is the structure of merit.
The parcel tag says that the building from 1227 to 1233 is. That's why I wrote the description the way it is.
I'm saying it's landmark worthy. Okay.
Okay.
The Upper Holly building, the Lower Holly building too. Okay. So a lot of this was built. Well, there was the old.
All right, so we're looking at this segment from here to here. That is 1227, 1229, 1231, 1233.
Which is right here.
Okay. The whole thing.
So that is State Street along here, 1227 to here, to Victoria, to here.
Right there, right?
Yeah.
Right here. Right
This corner here.
Yes.
Yeah, this is the Starbucks on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
which is right here, and then as it goes down to 1227, which is a
sofa you love.
This facade right here, I think.
So this door right here is that one there, right?
Right. But we are not looking.
So this one is not, we're not looking at this one?
That door right there that goes into that hall is this building right here, the Victoria.
So that is not the historic.
1233. Yeah, it does. No, because this is 1235.
Which is the Starbucks.
So we're not looking at the Starbucks. We go to here.
Well, you're looking at it.
From here to here.
Right.
1227 to 1233.
That's it.
So the project encompasses up to 1235. Is that
I
correct,
see.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
We're just discussing the.
But for the historic aspect of it, it goes to the storefront next to Starbucks.
1233.
1233.
From here to here.
So it's
Right.
there to there, right? It's part of it.
El Pueblo Viejo.
This facade would, I'm proposing that we do it in this color palette, and then this facade would be a very light, almost what it is right here with a very soft patina on it.
I don't think we're looking at that, are we?
Yes.
Where's
that's
that?
this building.
That's
right here.
this. Okay.
And then the one in between is this little facade right here. It's one of these storefront windows, and then we go to here, which is this building, which is
this one.
Oh, there we go.
I see.
Which is this building right here. So if we do it like this, that's that. This
is that.
Yes.
But I don't know how.
And then this is this, and then this would be this, and then Starbucks would be the one right here on the corner.
And Starbucks is going to, what color?
So Starbucks is kind of a cream color. It's right here. It's this color right here. And out in the sunlight, these appear much lighter than what they are here.
And the history of this one here, this is what? That was the old Sears building. And it has metal windows and this kind of strange looking plasters around and some kind of postmodern looking. So there's nothing really historic about that building, right? Am I correct?
Well, it's not like this. This one.
Not.
And the back of this building, these other parts are totally.
This
the other
right
pictures where well, the quality of the architecture is definitely not the same, right?
No, here's some pictures of some of the interiors right here.
That kind of a thing, this kind of surrounds the metal, the railings, this kind of. I mean, I'm having maybe I'm making comments already. I'm having a hard time knowing what to do with all this because we have the buildings of different qualities.
Yes. To be able to look at this. This is the State Street side. This is the Victoria.
Yes.
To see elevations because I'm having a lot of trouble with this.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I had one.
Yes.
I'm not exactly clear on the scope of the project. The description says to paint the structures and to abate a as-built entry tile. So, but I'm seeing there's like a stone archway over this thing.
No.
Is there more to this?
I had earlier when the meeting first started, I pointed to the photograph. If you could put that on camera.
Yeah.
And it explained that entry tile on the floor on the outside entry was as-built. It's an enforcement case. They did it without a permit. So the enforcement has been trying to get this rectified for, I guess, a number of months. And SEMA is, I think, they're not being too responsive. So this applicant came in to get this project approved. However, if there is an open pending enforcement case on a parcel, they need to get this taken care of before they can get approval for this project.
I understand.
Oh.
I guess I'm talking about two different things. Are we also going to add stone over the entry as this arch here?
Yeah, if you look at the.
Here it is.
Oh, see, I don't even know about that.
Yeah.
Find the drawing. Well, it's not stone. It's just it's faux. It's a faux finish.
But if you look at the plaster, this faux is going down to the top of the Capitol, whereas...
I think we need to be pointing at it here in front of the camera, please, for the viewing audience.
Okay.
Thank you. This is what we're going to be looking at? Okay.
Well, in other words, what I'm saying is,
Uh-huh.
in this photograph,
Yeah.
there is a separation in the plaster here
Right.
between the Capitol and this
And he's
arch.
filling it in.
So are we adding plaster, I guess, is what I'm
Yes, I'm
saying.
proposing that we just we fill in those two gaps and put a keystone on and do it in a faux type finish that looks like a Santa Barbara sandstone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wait, so I didn't quite catch that. So you're adding plaster to the veneer?
There's a little piece of a separation between this sort of arch above and the separation here. He's going to flush it out.
Okay, well that should have been in the project description.
Yeah.
That's
The other question is,
I don't mean to, Robert, sorry, I don't mean to belabor it, but there's also some decorative at the head, up above at the eave there as well that I don't think...
Yes.
The faux trompe l'oeil.
Oh, that's all that is?
It's just
not
trompe
an
l'oeil,
applied?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, I was asked to do something that would help give the building a little bit more interest as it goes through the entrance to the hallway there, and so I basically filled it in with a trompe l'oeil. It's just paint, and then here above these two capitals, I filled in. I'm proposing, of course, it's up for discussion, filling in the two 6-inch gaps and doing and adding about 3 or 4 inches to the center here as a keystone, and doing it as a faux Santa Barbara sandstone.
okay, and what's this?
That's just for looks. It's just to make it pretty. It's nothing.
And would you do the whole elevation or just a little?
I just did this because rather than spend the client's
go from here to there, right? You would do the whole thing.
Right, exactly. It would go from. I proposed to the owner that on the State Street and Victoria Street side that I do an elevation that shows exactly what each facade will look like, so you can see it. But what we decided after Lori met with you last time was that I get your opinion on basically the color palette and see if we're going in the right direction before I spend more of the client's money or the owner's money.
Specifically, my question is related to where the Keystone Arch is. Right now, that announces Victoria Court. So, what was the concept anyway? Where those letters would go?
One thing that was brought up from the owner was that we faux above it Victoria Court on here and take off the applique sign that was added at some point. And from the looks of the architectural ornamentation here, this looks like it may have been added at some point.
Years ago.
Yeah. So.
When it became Victoria Court, because they used to be all separate buildings.
Oh, okay.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Seeing none. Should we go to comments then?
Well, I'm having problems with the use of this many colors and where in our guidelines we say that white is the preferred color. It doesn't say it's the only color, but it's the preferred color. And I think that you could do things to liven this up, but to me, this is just going to chop it all up with all these colors. I mean, I don't know how many colors you have there, but it's a considerable number.
Basically, these colors along the top here. What do we have? 1, 2, 3. It's 8 colors of off-white, and then I go a little bit further with these two here.
And then in the center, where it's kind of dark, is where you have these really dark colors, which are...
Mr. Esposito, this is not a dialogue. She's just making comments.
Okay. Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay.
And I have my mic off, so...
Okay.
Anyway, I'm sorry. The phone, please don't ring the phone.
Yeah.
Those are my comments, and just one thing, I think that what we need to do is see the facades, you know, so we can get a picture of how this is all going to look, because this to me is just a lot of things, but I can't visualize how they're going to look on the building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes?
We're not going sequentially.
Not at all.
I would agree with Commissioner Boucher, just especially on the State Street facade, which is so important. I think it needs to be toned down in terms of the amount of colors, tones, variations of tones like that top row. I mean, I think the middle values in that at 8 would be But the interior of the court, which I think really needs to be, it does need to be brightened up. It gets sun in interesting angles throughout the year, but it's broken up with different buildings and different corners and so on. That would be, I think it could be, seems to me, a little more adventurous in there than you should be out on State Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sharp.
Madam Chair, this is obviously a difficult thing to look at in little bits and pieces like this, and I would say that the only way we're going to look at it in an intelligent way is to see the entire State Street elevation, the entire Victoria Street, maybe a section through the interior so that we see how they look in connection with each other. The interior is not as important as the exterior, of course, and but to look at it in piecemeal like this is really difficult to give it the fair judgment that it deserves.
I agree.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I agree with all of the comments. I also have one other more generic commentary to make, which is conceptual. And I was looking at these drawings, these pictures that you showed, and really you need to get away from that. These are beautiful pictures, have a lot of beautiful color and so forth. But, I mean, they're lovely. But they are not what we are supposed to be preserving. I mean, they have all that masterful color, which will be, you see it in Portugal, you see it in Spain, in Italy. It's just that it's not what Santa Barbara is like. So you need to basically restrict the palette. And that's one comment. The second comment is some of these buildings have some, for lack of a better word, bad detailing. They have postmodern treatment around the windows, the Victoria Court signage arch that you're working on. There is nothing really to be preserved on that, but it cannot be replaced with another non-historical component. That's almost worse. You know, like it's better to have the old bad stuff than to have new inappropriate stuff on its place, because it will be appropriate. And that key arch with the key and so forth, it is not really completely appropriate. Let me be a little bit more specific. Where it fails is in, I mean, like, we wouldn't have that. I mean, you would never have this little piece in here in a historically appropriate arch. It would not be like that. It probably would not have the capitals and tone like that. So if you want to change what's there, it has to be something that pays homage to Pueblo Viejo. It cannot be just another postmodern element substituted in. Those are the two conceptual comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment that this particular set of buildings is a difficult challenge. There's different shapes, sizes, proportions, and so on. At least the white helps to unify it. And what I'm having a problem with is a crazy quilt jumble. When I would visit this again, I would look at more simplicity and an idea of, again, unifying if you're proposing to change the color. I mean, I'm just going to weigh in. I think the soft colors would speak very loudly with the white, perhaps. I'm not sure, but when I look at the brighter colors, it's you bring some examples of colors in the EPD district, and no, let's see, this one here. This is definitely not. It's not my favorite. I mean, just from a personal standpoint, it just jumps out a little bit too much, even though that may have been approved. I think unifying is better than making every single building stand out. Again, you have a lot of variety in the shapes.
Are there any other comments? I'm going to summarize the comments from Mr. Esposito. I think we agree with your intention and the client's intention. However, for our better understanding, and for your more complete explanation, we'd like to see elevations of the State Street and Victoria Street elevations, and as Mr. Sharp noted, perhaps some sections through the interiors so that we can see how some of the interior colors are going to relate to each other. Secondly, our recommendation to you is that you take a look at our guidelines, and we do appreciate the fact that you took the time to wander around both Santa Barbara as well as the internet and the world, and perhaps restrict and tone down your palette. The suggestion has been made that perhaps the middle band here is perhaps more what we're looking for. And the other comment would be that if you are going to not simply paint and cover existing details, but actually add some ornamentation such as this arch and the trompe-l'oeil, that the details enhance what we'd like to see in El Pueblo Viejo and not what we might prefer to be changed.
Okay.
Madam Chair? I didn't hear any comments on the tile.
Right.
It is that, I think there was...
What's the address?
I can look on the site map.
You could see it on the picture, but you can't.
Where's the entry into the court, into the complex? It's here?
It would
Okay,
be
so it's...
1229 and 1231.
Isn't it 1229 or 12?
Yeah, 1229, 1231.
It might even be
It's right here.
1233. It's one of those three. Because I walk by there every day.
So it's vacant. Yeah, it looks vacant inside.
Yeah, it's quite
Oh,
far back.
it's either it's either this one, 1229, or it's 1233. Because it's been vacant for a long time.
1233 then. You can see the depth of that.
It's quite deep.
Really deep.
Yeah.
1233.
Yeah.
1233.
All right, so that's 1233. Are there any comments regarding this entryway tile?
Comment. I don't have any objection.
On this,
when you get up to it and look at it, it's almost metallic.
you mean the inset tiles or the that's not
the
concrete?
silver colored.
Was it brick before?
I don't know what it was.
It probably was.
It was something I happened to notice on my lunch hour, and I think the day I noticed it,
That's not
Steve
polished
House
concrete?
reported it as an enforcement case. And this was when he was a commissioner.
Yeah.
That was too brief of a comment. I should explain when I make a comment like that. I don't have an objection because I anticipate whoever occupies is going to, as part of the tenant improvement, change that anyway. So I don't want to help the...
I don't think people count on that.
No.
We're approving something. Yeah.
I'd like to take a look at it personally. I can tell it.
Yeah, for me it looks like polished concrete and
sure what the
stained.
material
It's
is.
not.
It's very contemporary and almost, like I said, it's almost metallic. You'd have to go look at it.
And this is going into the Victorian.
Yeah.
So probably the others are brick, but I'm not sure.
This one.
We should all go by there.
I
We'll
think
have to
so.
check
If you'd like to add to the comments that the commissioners would like to personally view the entryway before we make any comments.
Individually?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go.
Oh, we want a site visit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to make an individual comment here that I don't feel that tiling is traditional. I don't know. I look at it doesn't look traditional to me. Look.
Well, I think what we want to do is to see what the other entrances to the Victorian have, if they have a common thing or not.
I think so. Okay, I'm looking for a motion for, I'm assuming, a continuance? Yes.
About the tile. So in other words, this was put in without any permits. With just it was a kind of a modern art gallery when this was put in, as I recall.
You're right. That's
And,
what that was.
yeah.
You're right.
So that's what we're looking. So yeah, I
That's
think we
correct.
should all go see it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I would like to make a motion to continue this indefinitely with.
Well, I'm not sure. Do you want an indefinite continuance, or do you want to come?
It just means that when you're ready to come back, give me a call, and I'll tell you when you know what day you can submit by. It doesn't mean you can't come back for 6 months.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Isn't there a meeting next week, too?
Yes.
There is a meeting next week.
How fast can you draw?
Well, I think it'd be better to wait until January.
That's why I said indefinite.
Okay.
I need to stand up for this. You know, this is the type of thing that I have to look at this not only as a commissioner, but as a potential applicant myself, or a member of the public myself, or a building owner myself. And I just see things like these are the types of things that drive the citizenry crazy about commissions, to get bogged down on a 40 square feet, maybe 30 square foot piece of tile in a small entryway that I just don't think that we should be putting applicants through the process for something so minor. And that's coming from somebody who wants to preserve what we have. I mean, I'm fully understanding of my role, but you have to balance that with the needs and serving the public. I mean, that's what we're here to do, is serve the public and applicants and owners of buildings themselves. And I guess what I'm getting at is, are we really going to make them tear this out and do it again? To me, that seems to be wholly unnecessary, no matter what we go up there and see. And I mean, I can see from the photo, I'm not going to vote that I want to make somebody physically tear work out and expend those resources to do that. So it just seems heavy-handed for such a small item. And I need to speak up when I see things like this.
Madam Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Schallenberger. Yep.
Commissioner Schallenberger, I would answer that with this commission the job of this commission is to review projects located within El Pueblo Viejo and historic resources. And the reason you're looking at those is because the EPV, any exterior changes in the EPV need to be reviewed and approved by this commission according to our municipal code. So you're looking at it because it's in our. So if you think certain things such as this don't rise to that level, then the law would need to be changed.
No, please don't misunderstand. What I mean is I've looked at it. I'm saying it's fine, and I don't see that we need to spend more time and more effort and put the applicant through more. I have reviewed it.
Well,
and
maybe the rest of the commission will go look at it and agree with you.
I understand. I'm just putting out sort of a position statement on small items like this to not turn them into big items. That's all I'm saying.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The problem is that when one does it and then everybody else in the building thinks they can do it, all of a sudden you've got multiple impacts and what they call cumulative impacts. And then
Wait, Jake. I'm not saying to not review it. I'm saying review it. I'm saying we have reviewed it. And I'd rather we make a decision now, but I can see that's not where it's going. But don't misunderstand. I'm not saying to just turn a blind eye to this or any future project. I'm just saying, when something comes in small like this, let's make a decision and move on.
I would agree with you in terms of not wishing to discourage applicants or people who live in the city and work in the city and build and develop in the city. But I believe we had a majority of people who were uncomfortable with looking at this particular photograph and wanting to give it full consideration. And it may be that we all come back, and it may be that this item comes back next week. I don't know if we want to hurry it along, but unfortunately this applicant is not related to this entryway. So
It should be more lighthearted than I just presented him. I understand. I just wanted to make my pitch.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, so Commissioner Adams made a motion to continue it indefinitely, so we need...
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I wanted to make a comment.
Oh, we'll jump right in.
Well,
now.
the comment is that are you aware of our calendar, because we've switched meetings around? So
Indefinite, so...
yes, so
You
the
won't be
9th.
back next
So
week.
we meet again next Wednesday, but not again until what? The 16th of January? Is that correct?
No, the
January 6th.
January 6th.
So really,
We're
it would be
skipping
up to the
Christmas
applicant
holiday.
if you wanted to push it along a little bit. Thank you.
Because you expect to see the drawing.
I personally, I have to say that this facade that everybody doesn't like, I can't stand it. I don't like it, and I have to, I'm agreeing with the panel that you need to see, I would like to see what the whole stretch of the State Street side, especially the State Street side, looks like finished. And I would more than happy to render that whole Victoria and State Street side, because I'd like to see it as a model.
I really
I agree, 100%.
I really appreciate your work, because not only is your project, but you are across some very historical buildings. There's the Granada, and you're in a very important core of the city. So this is not a simple project, really, in essence. So that's a good thing that you're doing.
I'll be more than happy to do that.
We all
because I
thank
think
you
it's
for
important.
your effort, really.
Yeah.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'm looking forward to getting to the next step.
I think we all said we supported that motion. There were none opposed and none abstained. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I believe the meeting is adjourned
Until
until
such a time as
next week. The day, December 9th at 1:30. Is that right? December 9th. Next week. Next Wednesday.
Oh, don't you need to adjourn to the no, because it's not
Right.
a work related item.
Right. And we will not talk about anything.
So
We would
next
do
week.
that next week, okay?
Thank you.